let's just say this right up front. Everybody, hold on. You're going to need to rewind a lot. There is no other human I've met like you who has had the breadth of experience and somehow had their fingers in the pies of so many different high-profile things. It's almost unbelievable. And you seem to have had access to very deep levels of information and knowledge throughout the whole thing.
In 1976, remember that Jimmy Carter was elected president on November 4th of 1976. And one of the first things he did as the newly elected president, he contacted the head of the Central Intelligence Agency and asked that person to come in and provide to him all the information that the CIA had about extraterrestrial intelligence and the UFO phenomenon. Because as you know, President Carter, when he was governor of Georgia, had seen a UFO. Yes. Not just one of these faraway lights in the sky, but a UFO, which he was convinced what it was. So he called that person in. Well, that person was George H.W. Bush. He had been selected by Jerry Ford when Jerry Ford came in after Nixon resigned, and Jerry Ford selected George H.W. Bush to be the head of the Central Intelligence Agency. And so, but in that meeting with President-elect Carter in late November of 1976, George H.W. Bush said to him, "Oh, okay, you're the president-elect. Now, I want to have, before I agree to give you this information about the extraterrestrial and UFO information that we have, you have to agree to leave me on as the head of the Central Intelligence Agency for you. I want to become like John Edgar Hoover was for the FBI, stayed there, you know, one administration after another, and I will agree never to run for public office. I'll just stay here as the head of the Central Intelligence Agency." And Jimmy Carter said, "No, I have someone else in mind that I want to bring on as the head of the CIA, who happened to be Teddy Sorensen." And so George H.W. Bush refused to give him the information. And he said that, you know, in order for you to get this information, you're going to have to go to the House Science and Technology Committee, have them contact the Congressional Research Service, and have them request declassification for these documents, because the only people that are allowed to see them at the present time are those with a need to know.
Okay, now let's talk about how you ended up in the Vatican libraries. Let's talk about, I remember you showing the drawing that you sneaked your little, you know, yellow pad into your pants and came out with a sketch, a tracing of these symbols. But let's talk about how the Vatican became involved.
Well, what it was is that I contacted the Vatican and again asked them if I could get access to this, in their classified. And what happened is that that's what generated the Air Force authorizing me to go in to see the classified portions of Blue Book. This was actually in the files of the Blue Book. That's where I saw this. Is that they actually brought the files to Washington, D.C., and they brought them to the Jefferson Building, which was a brand new building for the Congressional, the Library of Congress. There wasn't anybody in those offices yet. And I went over there on a Saturday morning, had to show them 3 different forms of photo ID to get in. There were these 2 suits at the door, you know. And so I went in, and they said, you have to walk down this hall. And so I walked down the hall, you know, echoing in this hall with nobody in the whole building, brand new building, and get in this elevator, and I go down to the basement, and I get out of the elevator, and I can see this light on down in this office down there. So I go down, and there's 2 other suits there who recheck my ID, and it just occurred to me when I was coming down in the elevator, I opened up my briefcase and took out a yellow pad and put it under my arm. And so when I went down to the basement floor and met with these guys, they took my briefcase and said, "Look, you can't take any notes or anything on anything you see in there." And so I walked in, and what there was this room about maybe 18, 20 feet wide, about 10 feet deep, and they had these big folding tables. You think it's going to be something really sophisticated, right? They had these folding tables, and they had these boxes, these little shoebox size things. They were this kind of light green, kind of institutional green boxes, and they were filled with microfiche. And I took the microfiche out and brought them to one of these very unsophisticated tin kind of microfiche crank machines, and I started looking through them all. And I said, I'm never going to have time to read all these documents of what's in here, but I was looking for pictures. And so I found this set of pictures that showed an absolutely uncontestable UFO that had landed, had hit in this field, and it had plowed this big furrow across the field and was stuck in the side of a bank, and it was all snow there. So this wasn't Roswell.
Right.
So here's this UFO sticking at like a 45-degree angle up out of this big snowbank, and they're U.S. Air Force people all around it. They had these big parkas on, and I recognized what they were, and they were taking film of it. So this dated it somewhat. It was a film camera with those two big rolls on the top of the camera, so like it's in the 50s or something. And so I'm looking through these pictures, these different pictures of it, and suddenly I realized that at the bottom of the dome of this UFO, I could see these symbols. So what I did is I took out the yellow pad and I opened it up to the back cardboard cover on the inside, and I put it under the microfiche, and I shrunk the microfiche to fit right onto the page, and then I traced the symbols exactly. This is what they were, and I folded it back up, and I put the microfiche back, and I said, I better get out of here because I've now got this. So I put the yellow pad under my arm, and I go back out, and I walk out. And these two suits that were out there were kind of surprised that I'd come out of there. And so I'm walking away, and I pick up my briefcase, and I walk away, and I get about 15, 20 steps away from them, and one of them says, hold it, what have you got there? And I said, oh, it's my briefcase. I just picked my briefcase back up. And he said, no, what's that under your arm? And he walked over to me, and he snatches the yellow pad away like this, and he ruffles all the way through all the pages of it, and there was nothing
there.
on it. So he hands it back to me.
Because it was on the cardboard.
And so I go back the following Monday morning to Jesuit headquarters, right there in Washington, and I go in to see Father William Davis, who was my immediate superior at the Jesuits. And I show him this, and I tell him what I found. And he reaches down, and he slides out the bottom drawer of his desk, and he takes out a little manila envelope, and he slides out of it an 8.5 by 11 black and white glossy photograph of a UFO. And he hands it to me, and he said, my sister sent this to me, Dodie sent this to me. Her husband, whom I had met, was an air traffic controller in the Seattle airport. And his best friend is a commercial pilot who took this photograph right out of the window of his plane, and he didn't dare report it to anybody because of all this ridicule effect.
Right.
So he brings it to his best friend, who is the air traffic controller, saying, there, now I've done what I'm supposed to do. He brings it home and didn't know what to do with it, gives it to his sister Dodie and says, give this to your brother. He's a priest.
Okay.
And so he had it in his drawer. You say, what does that mean? What does that mean that people think like that? Why is this something that they should tell a priest about? And there I was at Jesuit headquarters in the process of becoming a priest, a Jesuit priest, and here I'm getting all this information, and yet the Vatican won't show it to us, won't tell us. Even a Jesuit who's the head of the Vatican Life won't show this to us. So I went to the National Council of Churches in WISC and asked them to set up a task force, and they wouldn't do it. So that's how I got into this. So that I ended up getting contacted by Stephen Greer, and he wants me to be general counsel for the Disclosure Project, and that my job was to vet all the different potential candidates we had.
This was late 90s now?
This was 2001.
Oh, it was in 2001.
Yeah, this was like beginning of 2001.
Yeah.
And he asked me if I would, because I had gone by this time from 1994 with Dr. John Mack and all that. I was invited to go to the International UFO Congress and brief them about how this thing was going with Dr. John Mack, because everybody was up in arms over this thing, right?
Yeah.
And so I came in originally in 1995, I think, and briefed everybody at the International UFO Congress about what John Mack was doing and stuff, and in my getting to interview more and more people about this. And so they asked me, they say, look, it's a little unique to have a Harvard Law School graduate who's legal counsel for the Jesuits to be here talking to the UFO community. Will you tell us what you think about all of this? And so I began to be invited back fairly regularly, and I was explaining to them, and it was enabling me to think much more deeply about all of this, to take the time to think about all of this. I had already done the JPL lecture to the SETI people, so I at first explained to them the theological implications of all this and the philosophical implications, and then I started talking to them about the different worldviews that people have, that people actually experience the UFO phenomenon from the perspective of their worldview, and that's what they think about the UFO phenomenon. So if you're, a military person, you think about it as a military threat. If you're a kind of a new age person, you think of, oh, these are going to come and save us. They're going to solve all of our problems. And so that different people have different experiences of the phenomenon.
So here you have it, disclosure, which was Stephen Greer's attempt. Just bring the experts in, let them tell what they saw. You're there, you've vetted them.
In a dead silence on the part of the media.
Dead silence.
And
I mean, I was there.
No congressman wanted to talk about it.
No one wanted to talk. No. And these guys, I mean, some of these older men in particular who had been holding on, through their national security oaths, were in tears. I mean, it was very challenging for them to tell a story.
I had agreed to represent any of them.
Yes.
If they tried to revoke their pensions, or tried to prosecute them for a violation of their security clearance, I had agreed to represent them individually. So that's how we got a number of them to come forward. And talk.
But they were still scared.
Oh yes.
So the point is, we did have a public disclosure. Yes. It went nowhere. Okay. Yes. So now we have this very deep dialogue that you're developing.
That's right.
And you and I talked off camera about this, and I saw it for myself. I was at a Buddhist retreat at a monastery recently, and I ran into a scientist from JPL. I said, oh, well, I'm just contracting right now. I'm not working full time. I said, what you on? She said, well, they've given me some of the samples from Mars, and we're looking to see if it's possible there's any life on Mars, and microscopic life on Mars. And I thought, oh gosh, here we go. And you and I talked off camera, and if you will explain to people how the public disclosure is going to likely roll out.
Oh, yes.
It's not going to be another big event. The big events have occurred, and it went nowhere.
No. I believe that what's happening now is there's two parts to this answer. I said that one of them is that now that these planets are being discovered, what they're going to be doing is they're going to say, oh, look, we've discovered a planet that has a sea of ice, and we've now discerned microscopic life beneath the surface of this ice. And so they're going to break that to begin with. Then they're going to say they're water in microscopic life, and now we've discovered aqua life in the seas of another planet. We've discovered very primitive reptiles and stuff on another planet. We've discovered mammalian life on some other planet, and they're eventually going to they're just going to feather it in one step at a time like this, and they're going to ultimately say, oh, we've discovered some extremely primitive life form like Cro-Magnon, life forms like that, whether they're reptilian or mammalian or whatever they are. And what they're going to do is they've decided to feather in to the world public the existence eventually of a more sophisticated civilization, and they're going to keep secret the fact that they know that there's a very highly technologically developed civilization that's actually been coming here, and they're just going to blow right by this.
Do you think, and this is the big question I think everybody in this particular area of study is asked, do you think that the incredible caution has been justified, that the public at large really isn't capable of handling this if it were something to happen very quickly?
No. Again, I think there are two answers to this. That it's not because of the public.
What are they concerned about? I mean, there's the whole technology part of the story.
That's the first one. Remember, now, during the Cold War, during that entire period, remember the Cold War went all the way from 1917. It didn't just begin at 1945. It began in 1917 with the overthrow by the Bolsheviks of the Tsar of Russia, Alexander. And ever since that time, there's been this dialectic going on with the nation-state capitalists in Western civilization against the socialists in Eastern culture. And the bottom line is that as long as the Cold War was going on, the United States was never going to reveal any of the technology that they had encountered with the Roswell crash. Okay, and they were going to try to weaponize it. The old saying, the Sufi saying, when a pickpocket meets a saint, all he sees are his pockets.
Right.
Okay, and so they're coming at it from that perspective, that worldview, which is a dialectical, confrontational worldview, that they perceive these extraterrestrial people as being a potential threat. Okay, and so that their job, it's their job assigned by both the Republican and Democratic Party. Your job is to protect the airspace, you know, and not allow anyone to come into the airspace that isn't monitored and taken care of. And here these people are coming and going, because what they're doing is they're being able to fund their, at that point, $300 million a year to protect us against Russia. And now they're into doing anti-terrorism. You know, this big one that one of our major assignments that all of us who care about this is to prevent the warrior class, the national security state people, from making this the ultimate other.
Right.
These are the ultimate other, and that we have to spend more than $600 billion a year.
That was the warning of Wernher von Braun.
That's exactly right, that they'll go right to this thing, and so you've got to stop them from doing that. So you have to establish a friendlier dynamic with regard
Which
to the
is what you're
extraterrestrial.
doing.
That's our job, is to do. But, so that's one thing, that one, which is comparatively predictable, at least for those of us who spent, you know, 30, 40 years in this area. That's one we have to be careful of. But on the other hand, Marshall Summers has, there's a whole set of books that have been written by this fellow named Marshall Summers, which is called The Allies of Humanity. And what he's talking about is the fact that there are, in fact, extraterrestrial civilizations that are very spiritually evolved, and very compassionate and supportive of our human family here, very concerned about what it is we're doing to the planet, the destruction of the natural environment, that this is an extraordinarily, not unique planet, but it's a very rare type of planet that gestates life, that generates
the diversity of life,
and the vast diversity of life, and it's an absolute fabulous experience. But there's only one in every like 5,000 to 10,000 planets that has this capacity. So this quest we're on of these exoplanets that we're looking for, there's probably 50 billion of them that they assume are within the Goldilocks zone. But there's very few of them that are of this nature, and that we, as the custodians of this particular planet, our species, Homo sapien, are not taking great care of this. In fact, we've allowed 1% to take control and destroy the planet. You know, and they're concerned about this.
And this, just to interject this, no matter which books you read on abduction and variations of that, this is the theme that comes up over and over. When the people go wherever they go, they see the future scenarios and what's happening to the Earth. This is a common thread.
But as Marshall Summers points out in his books, he says, look, the fact that there are these allies of our human species that have been here and have been trying to warn us about this, the fact of the matter is that many of the extraterrestrial civilizations in the life forms are sort of like we are. You know, they see the planet as a great source of resources, you know, in the DNA materials and stuff for planting life on other planets, etc. And these other extraterrestrial species are not necessarily any better than we are, if you really think about it. You know, that they've got specific objectives, the commercial trade, you know, in exploiting resources, etc. And so the fact is, we're getting this mixed message that there are some people there's some beings that are coming here and that are experimenting with us. They're doing biological experiments like we would in the jungle.
That's what we do.
You know, capturing people and experimenting with, or just like we do chimpanzees. So that it's important for people to understand this is a sophisticated issue, and there's a cross section of different types of beings that we're encountering here. And so it's the allies who are these spiritually evolved beings, and that we need to establish our communications with these beings and not fall into being duped into just having someone arrive and say, here, we can give you some super technology because we've got superluminal travel, and you know, in here all you have to do is end up establishing a unilateral a treaty with us. And what I've been trying to do is to use the special privilege that I've been given of getting access to a Harvard education and a law school education, and with the Jesuits and all the different people, and meeting, you know, Baba Muktananda, and getting to meet all the spiritual leaders of our people and our planet, is to try to develop a really intelligent, sophisticated, spiritually informed, but rationally developed set of policies for our dealing with extraterrestrial civilizations. And that this is a very important responsibility that our generation has, because we're at that spot. We are privileged to be in the position of when this is happening. And so we have to develop something, because this is going to affect our human civilization for tens of millions of years. And so that we're at that exact juncture. So if people are wondering why they happen to have been born at this particular time, what is the special mission that our generation has? And this is it: to protect our planet from an economic system that Pope Francis has warned us about, that are exploiting the resources of our planet, are destroying the natural resources, that are threatening the entire ecosystem that we have. Our responsibility is to undo this, to deconstruct these structural sources of injustice.
Yes.
As the Jesuit order, the Society of Jesus, has said in their 32nd General Congregation documents in 1975, our responsibility equal to the preaching of the Mass each day, which we would say equal to the meditation practice that each of us has. That we have an obligation to deconstruct the structural sources of injustice in both Western and Eastern culture on our planet. And we have to develop an economic system which is compassionate and caring for not only the planet, but for the poorest of the poor. And this is what Francis is calling people out to in his papal encyclical in June of 2015. That he's asking all of us to come forward. And at the same time, in his earlier statement they called Evangelii Gaudium, that he has issued a call for all people who have faith in the future of our human family to come forward with the good news that there is in fact a future for us. But we have to take responsibility for our planet, and we have to be careful with the second call the Vatican has issued for developing a really careful and sophisticated process by means of which we begin to communicate with extraterrestrial civilizations.
Mature diplomacy.
A mature diplomacy. That those are the responsibilities that we have, both of them.
Well, you have your work cut out for you, and it's really, truly profound project that you're doing at New Paradigm Institute, and that's going to be the subject of our next conversation and more. So I think you've given everyone a taste of Danny Sheehan, and I can't thank you enough for your decades of ethical work, and you're still going strong.
People can contact us
Yes.
at the Romero Institute.
Yes.
The New Paradigm Institute is a wholly integrated auxiliary project of the Romero Institute, named after Bishop Oscar Romero.
Is it Romero.org? RomeroInstitute.org?
It's the RomeroInstitute.org.
Yes.
And they can contact us, and they can become members, and they can get newsletters from us, and people can participate. Because everybody has to get on board this operation, because we all have to participate. I want our people to be participating in this process.
You want all of the perceptions and stories.
I want everybody's perspective on this thing. Everybody gets to participate in this, because this is our people, which is one of the signs that we need to be able to give to an extraterrestrial civilization, that we aren't run by a 1% elite. We're not run by some governing class.
There's a collective voice.
There's a whole collective process, that our people are mature enough to make our decisions for ourselves and be responsible. So people contact us, and everybody participate in this.
Absolutely. You can contact Danny at the RomeroInstitute.org and get on board. Until next time, thank you for joining us here on Gaia.